All right. Now we're going to talk about something maybe a little more controversial than some of the other stuff that we've discussed. And that is this idea. Oops. So there's this idea that most economists subscribe to, which is that to a very large degree, um, people and firms, which is like companies and stuff, pursuing their own self interest is really often good for society. Um, and again, I told you this was a little controversial and with good reason. Um, but let me kind of make a case for it first, and then we'll kind of walk it back a little bit. So, when we say that they're pursuing their own self interest, let's start with we've really got two characters in this story. We've got households, which is like um, you and me, basically, going to a store, buying stuff, okay? So, households, we pursue our own self interest by maximizing utility. And to oversimplify, maximizing utility means that we're looking for the best thing at the lowest cost. Okay. Now, again, this is going to look a little different from person to person, from household to household, but we're looking for high quality at low cost to us. And we're going to look around and pursue that for ourselves. Now, firms, okay, like let's say you're running a business, your self interest is generally going to be trying to maximize your profit, trying to make as much money as you can for you and your household. Um, Now, that may seem like a disaster waiting to happen, and it can be. Um, but let's talk for a minute about what a firm looks like when it's trying to maximize profits. Um, now, um, let's say you're McDonald's, okay, and you want to maximize your profits. Now, you might think, oh, well, if I want to maximize my profits, then I should jack up my prices and I should use the lowest quality ingredients because they're cheaper to buy. So I should make these really cheap hamburgers and I should charge really high prices. And that seems like a great idea, except you're not the only one maximizing your self interest. So are households. So they see these high cost hamburgers, they see these that they're it's low quality food, and they go, no thanks, not going to do that. Um, so um, McDonald's has to go, oh, okay. So I want your business. So how am I going to do this? Well, I'm going to bring prices down as much as I can. I'm going to bring quality up as much as I can while still being able to make a profit. And if I'm bringing costs down, if I'm bringing the price down, the only way I can make a profit is to produce in an efficient way. So I have to run my business as efficiently as possible. Uh, so what we've magically done with the interaction of these two self-interested actors is we are producing efficiently because again we have to produce efficiently to get this low cost, and we're bringing down costs for consumers, so we're having the highest quality product at the lowest price. So we're basically optimizing what we would want in society. Adam Smith, in A Wealth of Nations, talks about the economy being guided by an invisible hand. Um, so it's kind of neat because let's say that a company makes something that nobody wants. Well, that's a horrible use of resources. Well, if they make something that nobody wants, well, no one's going to buy it. And what are they going to do? Well, they're either going to change what they make or they're going to go out of business. Or let's say that a company is producing something, but in a very wasteful way where they're using way too many resources for the thing that they're making. Well, again, that means if you've got two companies and one is using all of these resources and one isn't, they're going to be able to provide the cheaper cost. And so these selfish, these self-interested households are going to run to this company who are providing it for less resources. Um, that's why when you talk to a lot of economists, they really like the idea of a laissez-faire economic policy. Like, hey, let's try to stay hands off as much as possible. Now, some of this may seem a little too good to be true, and it really is. Even amongst more conservative economists, you'll find that they don't feel like free markets are always going to be the most efficient way of doing things. We're not going to address all of the reasons why that is now, but I'll start with a few. So, people and firms pursuing the self-interest can hurt society. Um, for example, you may have heard of this lawsuit. It sounded like a frivolous lawsuit where this woman spilled coffee on herself and, got burns real bad. And you may have heard of this as a frivolous lawsuit. Turns out McDonald's had their coffee extremely hot, not like normal hot coffee. They had it extremely hot because you could go back and get refills. So they had decided if we keep our coffee really hot, people will get fewer refills. But it was also a danger to their customers. It spilled in someone's lap and they got serious burns, not just little mild things. So in this case, the profit motive kind of superseded the welfare of the people that they were serving. But there's a lot of situations where this self-interested behavior doesn't turn out to be for the best interest of society. For example, let's talk about externalities. So whenever two groups trade, we've talked about, hey, they're both better off. Okay. If they weren't better off, they wouldn't make the trade. Okay. Principle of voluntary exchange. We talked about this. But what if there's a benefit and a cost that's not being felt necessarily by the two people involved in the trade, but somebody else? I always give this goofy example to start. I have a vice. I love to eat Taco Bell. I do. And when I choose to eat Taco Bell, there can be unfortunate side effects for when I eat Taco Bell. And sometimes, I would run on my lunch break real quick, grab some Taco Bell, come back, shove it in my face. And sometimes my students would smell these unfortunate side effects. Now, I was okay with these side effects because I got all of the wonderful benefits along with these costs. Taco Bell was okay with these side effects. They didn't even have to experience them because I grabbed it to go and I came here. But the people in my class, they didn't get to eat the food. They didn't get any of the benefits, but they were experiencing all the costs. And I didn't factor in those costs when I bought the food, and Taco Bell didn't factor in those costs when they sold the food. Now, this is a goofy example, but this is pollution. Okay, we have plants here in Midlothian, steel, concrete plants that, they release all sorts of particles into the air, and some of them could potentially be bad for public health. And if you're the steel manufacturer or the cement manufacturer, you're getting benefits from that. And the people buying the steel and the cement, they're getting benefits from that. And so they don't mind the cost so much. But other folks in the community, they're experiencing some of those costs without necessarily receiving those benefits. So a lot of these costs and benefits aren't fully factored in to the trade. So there's trades that can occur that can actually make people worse off. Not necessarily the people in the trade, but people external. That's why they're called externalities, um, because they're people external to the trade. And the opposite can also be true, where sometimes there's trades that should happen that don't happen because there's positive externalities, something that would make society better off if the trade happened, but those full benefits aren't experienced by the buyer or the seller. Um, for example, recently we've had vaccines being created. And if we had completely left it up to free markets to do this, there's a chance that the prices of these vaccines would be very high. And that would keep people from being vaccinated. And, the pharmaceutical companies might be okay with this um, because they're getting profit elsewhere, but society as a whole would suffer because we are losing out on benefits from other people not being vaccinated. So in that case, free markets aren't taking into account these extra benefits. Um, so typically in free markets, goods and services with negative externalities like pollution are overproduced. Goods and services goods and services with positive externalities like education and stuff like that tend to be underproduced in a completely free market. So again, governments can step in and assist with that. Another place where free markets can kind of break down is monopoly power. Um, let's go back to our McDonald's example. So McDonald's was going to, produce the the best hamburger at the lowest cost, okay, because they wanted our business. Now, why do they want to do that? Because what happened if they didn't do that? You went across the street to Burger King or Whataburger or Chicken Express, whatever. Well, let's say we're in a situation where they're the only joint in town. Okay, if you want a burger or whatever, you have to go to McDonald's. Well, what happens to their incentives? Well, now they can charge that high price for that low quality burger, and you have two choices. You can um, go there, have the overpriced burger, or not. We're still in the land of voluntary exchange, but only barely, okay? Because, you don't have any other choice other than to go home and cook your own burger. Uh, in some situations, the monopoly power is even worse than that. I remember when I moved to Midlothian, we only had one choice of internet provider, and if they weren't good, too bad. That was the only choice that you had. So even if they had horrible service, even if they were overpriced, that was all there was. Okay. So a monopoly is a market where you have a single seller. And there are many markets that, even though they're not monopolies, they're close enough um, to where you're still going to see some of this behavior happening where they're not really looking out for the consumer because they don't have to. A lot of markets only have like two or three, um, and you're still going to see similar behavior to that. There's also a monopsony, which is a lesser known term, and that's where you have a single buyer. Examples of this would be places like Walmart and Amazon, where if you don't do business with Amazon, if you don't sell them your stuff, there's a pretty decent shot that it won't get sold because you're losing out on a lot of business. Same thing with Walmart. Okay, so those places are able to negotiate much lower prices from sellers than they could otherwise, and this can really hurt sellers when there's not very many buyers to choose from. We're going to talk about some other downsides to market economies. There's some really, really great stuff about market economies, but left unchecked, there's some really bad things that can happen. But we'll talk about those later.